Hey everybody, I am just checking in to see if there it is. I am now live, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. For a lot of you who don't know, if you are watching this video later, what I do here is I have office hours in my economics class on Thursday nights. And what I want to do here is kind of go through some of the concepts that I use in Economics 101, but in a real estate context. So you guys understand the underlying economics of the industry. So hold on a second and let me share my screen. Let's grab this guy right here. Today we're going to talk a concept called marginal propensity to save and marginal propensity to consume. And this is a concept that we look at in Econ 101 when we look at what we call the model or AE model. And what the AE model did is it allowed this economist named John Maynard Keynes to come up with a spending model that we can measure economic output. Some people don't like Keynes. I'm particularly not a fan, but he did come up with some interesting concepts that allow mathematics to be introduced into economics so that we can kind of really measure things and see the impact of certain things. So the AE model is what we call the GDP model. And basically it's aggregate expenditure equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. And in order to look at this, what Keynes decided is that for every marginal dollar that somebody received in income, meaning an extra marginal equals extra received, they can do three things with it. They can consume, they can save, or they can pay taxes. So if we look at it, we can see that every dollar that goes in, it either goes into this bucket, to this bucket, or to this bucket. And historically, what we see is that the consumption bucket is usually about 60%. Investment is somewhere, it's usually like 8 to 12%. We'll call it 10%. And then the government action is, I think it was 14% the last time I saw it. And this would equal the 100% of spending. So I know you're like, Chris, well, we're missing something here because this is 70, 84%. Well, we have the net exports. NET exports. And keep in mind, these numbers fluctuate as you go through it. And there's some other variation as well. And I shouldn't say 60%. It's usually like 66%. So keep that in mind. Actually, I think the last time I looked at it, when I looked at it for class, it was 66%. So you're saying, Chris, I came here to learn about marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to save. Why am I learning all this? Well, we know that taxes, which is government, so if I were to highlight this blue, we know that that is outside of our control. And in economics, we call that exogenous. And so what we are concerning ourselves with are only the two aspects that are inside the model, which is consumption and savings, which savings generally lead to investments. And so what Keynes decided was there's a different rate for each one of those. And he said that if somebody had, let's say, a 60% rate of consumption, then they would have a 40% rate of savings. because every dollar goes after taxes. So taxes is number one, and then it goes to a split between consumption and savings. And then we use that in the consumption or the investment aspect of the aggregate expenditure model. So we say all this and we kind of look at it, and I talk about the top 20%, 25%. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to ask the question about, are you in the top 25%? So I pulled up this article. I think I have it in the link below. I have the link below. It's from the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Business. And they created a model that kind of looks at historic averages of consumption and savings, and they are able to determine what ranking each quartile has. So I'm going to highlight here where they state this. Quartiles is this, respectively. What this means is that there is a spectrum, and as you increase on the spectrum from 0 to the final number, the marginal propensity to consume decreases. We can see here the first section, 0.55. Next section, 0.40. 0.22, 0.13, 0.12. I guess I should have said top 20% instead of 25. I think I read 25 somewhere, but I think here, now I see it, that we are in 25%. So what we see here is that every time somebody increases their income, the amount that they consume decreases. Now, this goes hand in hand with the study that shows happiness, right? Because once you hit that threshold of 70,000, you no longer need to consume for daily life. Now, this was a couple of years ago. Maybe it's moved since then. But the idea with this is that you are, because the thing about consumption and savings is we have different time preferences. So this is right now the consumption, whereas savings is at some point in the future. You will see a return. Right now, you will get a return in consumption. And what this means is that if you're a young family and you have a child who needs diapers, those are immediate concern. They need to be purchased right now. They are going to be consumption. If you have a child who is not in diapers anymore, but let's say they're like 7 or 8, you might start thinking about college. You would be saving because you know at some point in the future you need a return for that. So the idea here is that the NP of those on the lower incomes is generally higher. Now, one thing that one of the guys I watch on YouTube, Mike Zuber, talks about a lot is keeping your expenses down. And if you can do that, that means that you can keep your savings rate higher. And if you're doing this, then you are in the top 20%. According to this model. Because if your savings because if your consumption rate is less than, let's say, 20% of your income, you are in the top 20% of savers. And keep in mind, when we talk about savers, it's not necessarily just about savings, but it's also about investments. And so the last thing that I'll talk about right now is the savings and investment confusion. Let's say you earn $30,000 a year, and it costs you $25,000 to live. So what happens is you are on a metric here where you're at 25K, and you have 5K that you can save. You might not save all that 5K, but you might save, let's say, 3,000 of it, right? So 3,000. So now your next year, you're going to do the 25K again, and you're going to save again 3K. So now that's a total of 6. And at this point, it is savings. But eventually you build it up to a certain level, probably 10, it might even be 6,000. And you say, I need to put this somewhere else where it earns a higher return, a higher interest rate. That is when savings turns into investment. For some people, it's a couple of years. For some people, it's a couple months. It's different for every person. It depends on many factors. It depends on your income. It depends on your expenses. It depends on your family size. It depends on your location. Several factors play a role into that. And one of the areas that I study a lot is the differences in individuals of what makes us unique. And the thing that I love about economics is that, yes, we have certain measures that we can check, but one thing we can never get away from is this idea of uniqueness of individual. And when I talked about earlier about Keynes creating models that we could look at mathematically, what I mean is when we look at the aggregate expenditure model equaling consumption and investment and government spending and net exports, we can identify what the impact of each one of these is. So if $1 comes in consumption, how does that impact the overall expenditure for the economy? And then what happens is we can identify, well, we're used to getting $1 million in consumption in the month of May, and now we're only getting 800,000. Well, what does that do to this? That is the power of economics, being able to identify through these models the impact. It's not predictions. It's more about the impact of things. But there's one thing that we have to keep in mind whenever we look at economics. And in real estate, it ties a lot into this, because in real estate, we have some homes that have windows there, and we have some homes that have windows here. Some person's going to love this home. Some person's going to love this home. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Learned a little bit about marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to save, the aggregate expenditure model, and we discussed a little bit about how savings turns into an investment. And let's see, I'm almost at about 15 minutes. So I appreciate anybody who came and watched. And if you watch this in the replay, let me know what economic questions you have and see if I can help answer them for you from a teacher's perspective. Thanks, guys.